Hey all, welcome back to another one of my Making a Murderer thought diaries. Okay, time to reflect. Here's where we're at in our puzzle. So far I've covered basic criminology and psychology by using common sense and logic. I've done experiments. I have spoken to specific professionals in different fields. I have done research, bringing facts and statistics, and I've even played the devil's advocate in finding balances. In fairness, without balance, the table that we have our puzzle on would tip and fall to the ground. In all cases, no matter where you are in the world, you have to remember, this is real life. This is no episode of Scooby-Doo. We ain't going to find out as easily who's behind the mask. We need to think of all those outside the box thoughts, but maintain grounded, for falling down rabbit holes can lead to more frustration. Like I said in podcast 3, just because one thing may fit in a theory, don't disregard the 9 other things that don't. This is where you will cloud your own judgment. From what I've learned and essentially taught myself in these thought diaries and the journey so far, just remember to keep it real. For the real killer committing this crime, they would have. The real killer or killers are human, just like you and I, and even they make mistakes. We have to appreciate how far we have all come and where we sit as individuals in the case on what we believe has happened. At this stage, none of us really know who's right or wrong, but we also should never lose focus on what exactly it is we are trying to put together. Let's literally look outside of the puzzle itself. Let's grab the puzzle box's cover and analyze the picture. It's going back to grounding. We know the pieces we are trying to fit in. It is to form the crime itself. But the more important foundation of this mystery isn't the corner pieces. It isn't even the middle illustrated crime picture. It's ultimately the who. Whose picture are we trying to build in our puzzle world? So, like a trilogy, although we are 5 podcasts in, let's rewind it back to basics. Back to where in reality, I should have started my puzzle thought diaries by doing this. But, like I said in podcast 1, we are having to do this puzzle back to front, for this is not our average 1,000-piece jigsaw. Mind you, the number reference is similar, but instead of just 1,000 pieces that create a picture, those 1,000 pieces are the metaphors for the lies we keep seeing. So, puzzle pieces down, everyone. We won't be needing them tonight. This thought diary is all about the victimology of Teresa. Was she the real target? If so, for what reason? Or was this all just opportunity, the illusion created, hiding the real picture? Once we can establish the basics of that, we can then return all this back to the puzzle by using our balance to see who fits the motive, which is our why, the proximity, our where, and the opportunity, the how. To do this one, I'm going to be getting help from no other than Investigator T. You'll be hearing from him yourself in an interview I'm about to have with him. Disclaimer. This is based on Investigator T's experience. He is not accusing anyone of this crime. Also, this is a fragile thought diary. This podcast means no disrespect to Teresa nor her lifestyle. We are at a stage where it is now disrespectful not to do this. She deserves closure too. More so if the wrong people are in jail for the crime they didn't commit. It's all part of the balance. That's why they call it the ugly truth. It's taking that leap and talking about those puzzle pieces we know that are there, but aren't always confident to pick them up and have a really good look at them. Okay, so welcome Investigator T.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. So you are aware of my thought diaries, which you're actually subscribed to me now, so thank you for that and for your support.
That's all right.
Since you have watched and listened to all my videos so far, you would have seen that I'm trying to put together the Teresa Halbach crime/disappearance by using the analogy of a puzzle. So I thought by having you here, it would be a perfect way to fit all this in, all the pieces together, so to speak. Using your experience and your opinion, could you take us back to where it all begins, which is like profiling a victim? Can you start by giving us a basic summary of what a victimology means to you?
The victimology is really looking at what we would do is look into their backgrounds, who they know, who they associate with, what kind of lifestyles they live, any kind of background information that could lead us to where she is likely to go, her likely movements. Once you establish a pattern of her movements, then it becomes fairly easy to be able to establish where she should be at certain times, who would normally be there, what time she would normally be there, whether someone would know those routines as well.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a victimology is really just getting on the background of, because obviously Teresa is the linchpin in the investigation, the whole reason you're there.
Yeah.
So the more you know about her, her background, her schedules, her timings, her job, friends, all that sort of stuff, the more likely you're going to be able to come to the point where her and the killer intersect in time.
Yeah.
If you don't know where she goes, if you don't know who she's friends with and whatnot, you're basically plucking at straws. So doing a proper victimology from the very start, once it's determined that she's more likely something sinister's happened rather than she's just disappeared on a holiday, for example, that usually after about 2 or 3 days, the victimology will be done hard out.
Oh, okay.
And I'll go from there.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Thank you for that. So let me start by telling you what we know about Teresa. In fairness, it's limited, and the only information we know that's public is due to when the case was in trial. I can't confidently say that the victimology profiling of Teresa was done efficiently from the beginning, but I am confident in saying that if it was, that law enforcement and the state weren't forthcoming in releasing any kind of hints, clues, or details that Teresa's lifestyle or choices were a risk, therefore could have any fatal impact on her. The state in trial, especially Ken Kratz, he kept Teresa's image of a respected, mature woman that lived for her family and had no reasons to be harmed by anyone. Investigator T will be taking notes as I go through the details of what we know of Teresa Halbach. Okay, so let me get started. This is what we know at the time of Teresa Halbach's disappearance/death. Teresa was a 25-year-old single Caucasian woman. She had no dependents of her own. She wasn't married nor had ever been. Her mother's name was Karen Halbach and her biological father was Richard Halbach, who tragically passed away in 1988 on holiday. She was one of 5 siblings, 3 girls and 2 boys, Teresa being the second born. There was Tim, Teresa, Mike, Katie and Emily, the girls being her half-sisters. There seemed to be a close bond between Teresa and these girls. She lived in Green Bay while in college, but at the time of her disappearance, she lived in St. John Hilbert, where she rented a house which was owned by her family. They were also her next-door neighbours, that being her mother and her stepfather, Tom Halbach, who was the brother of her late father. She had one roommate named Scott Blowdorn, and she had met Scott through high school. It appears that she had a few circles of friends. They were all in different stages of their lives. It doesn't appear she had any known enemies. She was described as being an intelligent, friendly woman and had a passion for travel and photography. After graduation, Teresa became an intern photographer at the Green Bay studio. She also did work for Auto Trader and would do hustle shots. I just want to quickly explain what a hustle shot is. It's when a photographer sets up their own deals with customers off the book and records. Teresa did these hustle shots as she profits more from them financially. She also was involved in glamour photos, which are what we would call tasteful nude/lingerie portraits of clients or couples. You wouldn't exactly call it pornography, put it that way. It was more tasteful and elegant, and yeah. There are 3 men we know Teresa had relations with, both of a sexual nature and in relationship statuses. I will go through them individually next, but I just want to go over the other significant men in her life that we're aware about, but we have very limited details of their relationship with Teresa. That is immediate family, her brothers Mike and Tim. It does appear, though, that she had more to do with Mike due to the common passion of videography, but she did more things with leisure activities with Tim, the older brother. Her stepdad, Tom, and also her boss, Tom Pierce, from the Green Bay studio. Just quickly on Tom, I just want to cover a few topics because after doing some research, there was a bit I found out. He actually gave a very interesting statement. He went into detail, and I quote, "Teresa would have had to have someone ambush her, hit her with a weapon, or drug her," end quote. Tom made this statement 6 days after she was reported missing, before anyone knew anything about what happened to Teresa. And he actually said this to the investigators that were speaking to him. When you read the context around it, it does stand out as an overthought, so to speak. The way he was describing how, someone would attack her. But, the first few sentences before that, he was talking about her being fit. So, you just want to balance that out. He also was the one who called Teresa's mother, Karen, expressing his concern that Teresa hadn't been to work, which then started the whole, well, where is Teresa? Tom Pierce makes a statement that Teresa told him that she didn't want to attend a job where being the photographer at a wedding due to Ryan, her ex, being there. So Tom had to do that job instead. This is the time of events is believed to happen close to October 2005, but we're not exactly sure exactly where that timeline it fits in. Tom was asked if he ever had a sexual relationship with Teresa, which he declined, saying it was ever and only professional. Tom also made an admission early on that Teresa had told him that Halloween the 31st was her last day of employment. There is no proof of this termination of clients or that this was Teresa's last day. This was apparently just Tom's verbal claim. Tom also said that Teresa was getting harassing phone calls from a mystery person and it would upset her. Okay, so before we move any further, Investigator T, I really just want to quickly cover the 3 men in her life that we know played a significant part. They were never considered as Denny's suspects, and from what we know about victimologies, I think that it's only fair that we cover all our bases. So I'm going to start with her first one, and that was her high school and her college boyfriend, Ryan Hilligas. They dated for 5 years. Ryan is suspected to be the guy that Teresa references to when she spoke about being in an abusive relationship in college. I have to stress this though. This has never formally been confirmed, so we don't really know if that's who she was talking about. Ryan and Teresa had contact right up to the day before the 31st, with Ryan claiming that he last physically saw Teresa on the 30th of October of 2005 at Teresa and Scott's residence, and that she was wearing a cowgirl costume as she was ready to go to a Halloween party. He doesn't recall what time of the day he was there, nor does he recall exactly what he was there for, but he just remembers he was dropping off something to Scott, which was his best friend and also Teresa's roommate. There is emails from Teresa to a friend where she expresses that she feels that Ryan still gives her that look, that he has some feelings still towards her. There is also a written email where she questions how she loved him for as long as she did. We don't know if there had still been random hookups or whether the relationship was now just strictly friendship, but phone logs do show that calls were made between them both over the months and even weeks prior to her disappearance. We do not have any access to any text messages or the context that could have been ever exchanged between the two. It should be noted that in the very early stages of the disappearance of Teresa, it was actually Ryan who took control of the search party, had full access to Teresa's property, and he even provided law enforcement with tips, very personal belongings, and was the family's go-to. Ryan did not disclose his past personal relationship to the detective straight away, that he and Teresa had been in a long-term relationship, as he didn't think it was relevant. In the trial of Stephen, when questioned, Ryan does admit that he was never asked for an alibi, nor did he ever provide one. Further into the investigation, Ryan provided law enforcement with a day planner that he claims that he got from Teresa's desktop at home. There has been speculations that this is false, and in fact this day planner was in the RAV the day Teresa went missing on the 31st. There's also other supporters out there that have potentially maybe debunked that as well. He also early on inserts himself with a locked narrative to having acknowledgement of how Teresa's front light was broken prior to being found on the salvage yard, which again, this one has been debunked by Stephen's lawyer, Kathleen. She said that there was absolutely no claims, insurance claims, and it was a lie. It also is to be noted by Ryan's own account that he moved into Teresa's residence after her disappearance because he said he was there to help look after her cat. We also have Scott Blodorn. This was Teresa's roommate. Scott was living with Teresa. He was also Ryan's best friend. There was a sexual relation between him and Teresa. We don't know if it was an ongoing or a one-time thing. However, we have seen an email from Teresa describing Scott as a pig. So going by this kind of context, it doesn't appear to be anything more and had finished based on a roommate friendship. Scott says in an interview that it wasn't like Teresa to be away for nights at a time, yet there's an obvious contradiction here. If that was the case, why didn't he raise the alarm that she hadn't been around? His own birthday was on the 2nd and no word. Yet he doesn't consider that as strange. Just like Ryan, Scott was part of the search party when the initial search of Teresa began. He wasn't as forward as Ryan, but he did participate in interviews with the media and he was always in the background. There is also another aspect of the case that has had a few supporters question how much he actually knows. And this is purely by his own actions when Kathleen's investigator tracks him down and asks him for a chat. When the investigator discloses that they were looking into further Denny suspect, Scott offers up the name Ryan Hilligus. You know, that's kind of placing him as potentially being a main suspect. Something also that has been open to speculation is the interview from the news media, which was taking place in Teresa and Scott's kitchen. There seems to be something on the counter bench behind him. A few people have wondered whether it was a spoon, whether it was a fork, but there's been a few other people that believe it could be the sub key that was eventually found in Stephen's trailer. This is just yet another question mark on Scott's involvement over the years, especially with supporters. Scott was never considered as a suspect. He wasn't asked for an alibi, yet this is the guy that has full access to Teresa's belongings, and by living with her, he definitely has opportunity. There's Bradley checks. We don't know how they actually were introduced, but we are aware that Teresa had taken some glamour pictures of Brad and at the time his wife. Teresa ended up having a sexual relationship with Brad. We can't say if it started while he was still married or after, but the information that Brad provided was after he and his wife separated, before any relationship with Teresa went physical. There was a court trial where the ex-wife was requesting the pictures Teresa had taken of them, and Teresa too was involved in that court case. When the law enforcement went to Teresa's home early into her disappearance, it was Ryan who gave them the negative photos of Brad and his wife in these glamour shots. It was claimed that they found them in the trunk at the bottom or the side of her bed. We have discovered that the ex-wife had put a restraining order or violence restraining order on Brad, and he also had been slapped with a gun restriction at the same time. Brad says that they remained friends once him and Teresa's sexual relationship had ended. He also said that he and Teresa had gone out for lunch 2 weeks prior to her disappearance at the Bay Park Square. One thing happened in this case that they actually documented was Teresa's friend alerted the police while they were in Teresa's house and all the search party was there, and she wanted to have a private conversation with them, is that they should be on the lookout and investigate into the DJ guy that is Brad. The friend said that Teresa had gotten herself into something that she doesn't understand. Furthermore, from this, there was an email from Teresa to this said friend saying that she had cut it off with Brad because he was weird. He was the one that offered up Scott's name to the officers and advised them that Scott, the roommate, and Teresa had slept together. Side note, Ryan claims that he wasn't aware his best friend and his ex had been intimate. Brad also places himself into the timeline of her disappearance, as he admits the day she went missing on the 31st of October at 12:45, just after lunch, he had sent Teresa a text message, but she never wrote back. No one has seen this message or the context of it. He was asked what his alibi was, and he said he was sleeping. It was never looked into further than his word. Okay, so Investigator T, now I want to take you down on a timeline and get you to pick up my puzzle pieces and put into perspective how the case goes from here. Okay?
Yep.
It's the afternoon of the 3rd of November 2005. You have just become aware of a missing 25-year-old woman. Her mother has called to say that she hasn't had contact with anyone for 3 days. The mother has been ringing around, but no one has any idea where she is. They have realised that her last stops are around the Manitowoc area. Your law enforcement officers and yourself send out Colburn to go suss out the salvage yard and other clients that she had visited that afternoon. Colburn comes back saying to you, as the lead investigator of this missing woman, that Stephen was cooperative, that there was no signs of anything sinister, and Stephen said she had left the salvage yard. What happens next? How should and how does the victimology start from that point?
When I read that first question that you sent to me, is quite interesting about how, just diverse for a little bit. How did Colvin end up going to Avery's? What was the tip off that led him there?
Because they had word that they had found like a day planner and that they had seen, and phone calls on the logs, they had started ringing people back and thought that Stephen Avery was one of her last points. So it was actually Ryan Hilligus that did the phone calls and tipped it off and told the investigators that, that was one of her last calls was this Stephen Avery, and that's what got the ball rolling for them to go to the salvage yard.
Yeah. All right. Well, with the victimology, the first place I'd probably start looking would be her phone records and her bank records. Getting like a comprehensive background from as many people as I could about who knew her. So when Colvin went to Avery's, the victimology had been done to, I suppose, like a degree at the very start. But it's been my impression that from that first victimology that where they ended up at Avery's, that victimology fell away a little. The drive to cast the net wide, I suppose, and keep all the options open about possible suspects and that sort of thing seemed to get narrowed down fairly intensely once like that day and maybe the next day. I think when the car was found.
Mm-hmm.
The victimology was pretty much non-existent at that stage. You use a victimology to determine background patterns, and it points in a certain direction. So I suppose they did that, but it was very narrow focus. There wasn't a lot of scope to their digging around and trying to find out where she was, because the first lead, or basically the only lead they followed off the phone records, was heading to Avery's place and going from there.
Exactly right. They didn't even follow up to see, for all they knew, she made it home. She had done all her clients, and her last point was at home, which then exposes the victimology a wider range, because now you then have to consider all those people surrounding her that can come in and out her life.
And it seemed at the very start that there was not a lot to link Avery to any offence at all. There was nothing. And like the interesting point that I saw on one of your videos was the infamous doll experiment.
Yeah.
And you really struck a chord with the bleach smell.
Yeah.
If that was the case with Stephen killing Teresa on the mattress, or even just making her bleed on the mattress, you didn't even have to kill her there.
4th of October, Lieutenant Link returns to the salvage yard, even though at this stage there is no indication still that Stephen had anything to do with Teresa being missing. Stephen even allows Lieutenant Link and all the law enforcement to do a quick sweep through his trailer without a warrant. Still nothing. You, as the investigator, you have sent out helicopters, search teams, and you have tips coming in that has been of sightings of her car, and there's just a lot of tips coming in general regarding Teresa. Where would you be in terms of the case at this stage and linking the victimology to this kind of information?
I think the victimology is really important at this stage. Once they went to Avery's, based on that initial victimology inquiry that they did, there was nothing really else to follow up on. It was, if she had been killed there would have been some sign, like you said, the bleach would have been a dead giveaway. Yeah. But there was nothing conclusive proved, so I'd probably go back and analyse her phone contacts again, and have a talk to all the people that had possible sightings of her, because if you you determine a location, who she's meeting, why is she there, is she there for job, recreation, were there any witnesses? But it didn't seem, or I haven't seen any evidence of it, that they followed up the other sightings at all, and that's where the victimology kind of fell away for me at this point in time. Once they went to Avery's property, the focus of the investigation narrowed to a point where it was almost inevitable that he was going to be having the finger pointed at, because he was the only one being looked at. And the other sightings, even though, like you said, there were lots of them, I haven't seen anything, no notes or anything that would suggest they were followed up at all. So it's really it's such a narrow focused investigation. It was really quite surprising when, I found out that there were sightings of her, and they weren't followed up. It blows my mind.
I know. There was quite a few sightings of her car being abandoned. There was even, there was even a sighting that someone was allegedly saw her alive sitting at a road, I think it was a roadhouse or something up the road. Like, there was sightings of her being actually alive, and still nothing. They just just swept them off and was like, that's not the direction we're going in.
Victimology the pattern needs to be established, and the stronger that pattern becomes, that background pattern, the more likely you are to find out where the killer has intersected her in her timeline.
Yeah.
If you if you pull back from the victimology, and obviously you have to to a degree and start focusing on the now and what you're looking at, but you should always have, I don't know, probably a quarter of your task force working in the background, pulling your bank records, pulling your phone records, doing background interviews, canvassing neighbourhoods, door knocking, all that sort of stuff. And it just never happened.
No. Okay, so this is where it gets really critical. This is where I was starting before. It's now the morning of the 5th of November 2005. You are aware that Stephen has left his property and is heading up north with the family to a holiday cabin. You get told roughly about 4 hours later that the RAV4 has been found on the salvage property amongst 3,000 cars by a civilian conducting a search in less than 20 minutes. There is talk that the car has been brought back into the property through the quarry. This is what your other detectives think at this stage, and they later say this to Stephen also in an interview. When does the victimology stop in terms of it being a passion kill by someone close to the victim versus an opportunity kill by a random or an acquaintance? Like, does it ever stop, or should the victimology just keep going until...
No, it keeps going. It keeps going until there's a body found, or a scene found, or something more significant than a vehicle.
Right.
The vehicle doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove where it came from. It doesn't prove what happened. It doesn't explain who was in the car. It explains nothing. It's just it's an object with evidence in it. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole puzzle by any means.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the thing that struck me with the vehicle is historically random killings are really rare.
Mm-hmm.
And generally they're done. If a random killing is committed, usually the killer moves on. However, because the vehicle was, I don't think there was an offence committed in the vehicle. The killer wouldn't have the time or the means to dispose of the body and clean up the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like she lived a risky lifestyle, so I don't know if she was in the habit of picking up hitchhikers or anything like that. But if the other sightings were followed up, they may have found she met someone at a cafe, like a stranger who asked for a ride or something along that sort of scenario. But again, witnesses would have seen this and been able to explain a little more. But because of those other leads weren't followed up, then we'll never know, will we?
Or that's what it's coming down to. And you've got things like that front bumper light that was knocked out. You know, people have tried to, speculate, and they have good reasons to, that maybe that's what caused her to stop on the side of the road, that she had hit a deer or she had had an accident with someone and she's pulled over and something has gotten out of control. And like, it's going back to what you're saying. It's the timeline and following up witnesses. There was even a witness statement that they thought that they saw her stopping on the side of the road to take a photo of a cow in the field. And this wasn't properly followed up. So if that had been followed up, it would give you a sense of direction and just somewhere to base the next part of her timeline. But again, nothing was followed. It was just like, nah, she wouldn't be taking a picture of a cow. Yeah. And it was just move on. Because
her car, it's hard to say. It was done really shabbily from the start. There could also be the scenario where if she did hit something that caused damage, then a passing motorist could have stopped and taken her away in his car.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many scenarios that would just, I just don't get it. One thing that I'm not sure if it would have been possible back then, but I thought about it when I was making notes, was how quick they would have got a hold of her phone, because you can use location-based data to track the mobile phone, as most people who watch movies know. You can actually ping phones and get a location of where it is. So I was wondering why those sorts of things weren't done as well.
Yep. I just want to try to find a balance in between this, because while I was doing like the timeline for you, and we had that discussion, like where we were going to go with the victimology, it came to me when I was writing it, and I thought it's only fair to bring up on, playing the devil's advocate here and being on the side of maybe the cops or the law enforcement were being. You've got to find the balance between whether they're incompetent or whether it was deliberate. But would you say that it's fair, with the time frame that they had, that a victimology wasn't done based on how quickly it all started to point in the direction of Stephen Avery? You kind of touched base on that before. Like, you did say that it was looking like within a few days you'd get the victimology started, but by 2 days later the car's already found on his property. So there's not really where do you go from there?
Well, that's the thing. You don't know how the car got there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know anything about it. So that victimology, I think, becomes even more important, because you get to the circumstances behind how something has happened or appears to be the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then, that car, it's just once that car happened, then they stopped looking anywhere else. But like I said, even when the car was found, even when they were looking at Stephen and going through his trailer and going back to Teresa's house and it was very narrowly focused. There was no one else looking at the peripheral, and just, I don't know, I would have, like I said, maybe a quarter, just not directly involved in locating evidence,
mm-hmm.
but just doing background the whole time.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Just want to slip something in there with the 3 gentlemen in her life that we know that she had that contact with. We have the ex-boyfriend Ryan, we have the roommate Scott, and then we have the sexual relationship with Bradley. Any of them kind of would be, if you as the investigator, would you be going background on this one? Like, this one's really standing
definitely.
out.
All 3 were known associates of her. They've all sexual relationships with her. They're all white, and the majority of killings are race-based. So it's very, very, very rare to have like a cross-race killing,
mm-hmm.
Especially intentional. It's almost unheard of, almost.
Yep.
So those 3 I would have been fully focusing on, and if they did their job properly, they would have figured out all the other interesting background stuff with Bradley, which for mine,
mm-hmm.
oh gosh, he just stands out like a beacon. Scott and Ryan, to a degree, but I don't think they had the motive to end Teresa. I don't think there was enough there to put themselves in a position where killing her was the final option.
Yeah,
there's only one person that I would be looking at, and that's Bradley.
Yeah, and I remember, because when we first started this, you were Ryan, yep, he's got it. And then I remember off air, we were having a chat one day, and I brought up Bradley too, and I'll never forget, you were like, why didn't you ever tell me about him? And I'm like, oh, well, we kind of stopped doing the Denny's, so I forgot to mention him. And you're like, Jesus Christ, he stands out. And I was like, yeah, well, he's a new player in the game. And you're like, well, he's definitely a player that has all the right, ingredients to make this fit. He even inserts himself in her timeline on the day. He does admit that he sent her a text message, and he claims that she never replied back. And I've always said, it's not what we don't see in the log. It's not what we see in the logs of the phone calls. It's what we don't see in the logs of the text messages. Had he been sending her messages? Was that message saying to her, don't forget to come over to my house after you finish work today, I've got to give you something. You know what I mean? So is that...
Well, I know for a fact... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
It was a long time ago, I think 2005. So phone technology has improved a hell of a lot since then.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that now we can, even after a couple of weeks, some telco providers store their text messages for a long time. So getting onto that sort of thing back then would have given you the guts of what her social life is all about.
Yeah.
Question, Bradley move away at all after the killing?
I'm not too sure. I haven't I've skimmed the surface of Bradley lately, but I haven't gone deep in there with where he is or what he's doing. I just know that he was a DJ. He worked nights. The day that they did ask him for his alibi, and he said he was asleep that day, and they took it as face value. They didn't investigate that further than he was asleep.
There's a few things that sort of rang bells with Bradley. One was the fact that he was a DJ, which is a risky lifestyle. Mm-hmm. He had a history of violence because his
ex-wife,
his wife got a restraining order on him.
And even slapped him
as well, didn't he? He had a gun.
Yeah, so he got the exact same day he got slapped with a firearm restrictions. So that goes to show that he had possession of a gun. So again, and then you have that whole, you've got the photography with him and his wife and Teresa involved. How deep did it really go? Was there anger in it? Was there, you don't know. But again, you said it before, he has got some ingredients to make this a recipe of disaster.
Yeah, that's where the victimology would have come into play if they were doing it properly.
Yeah.
Even if Stephen was the primary focus.
Yeah.
It's never a given. Even homicides that I've been involved with, where we've actually caught the guy always handed himself in.
Mm-hmm.
That's only the start of it. There might be a second accomplice. There could have been people that helped cover it up. We've charged people for aiding and abetting. So it doesn't just end when you're looking at the person they think did it. The victimology is such a big thing, and it's so overlooked here.
Absolutely. Which I'll take it to the last part, and it kind of ties it all in, and you've kind of summed it up throughout the whole thing, but I really just want to touch base on this. So you've got the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th of November. Yeah. They find all these items of evidence that allegedly make Stephen Avery guilty of the murder of Teresa Halbach. Yet none of it makes sense nor fits any plausible timeline. It has no forensic link that supports the state's narrative either. It's all circumstantial. The victimology has now been smoke and mirrored by the criminology of the crime. Does that now become the main focus? As in, do you stop looking at why Teresa and redirect all your focus on who the perpetrator is instead? So
definitely keep focusing on Teresa.
Right.
But I think because it's so long in the tooth now, a lot of records have gone, witnesses have gone, memories are barely be able to be recalled. So that victimology, the reason that it's very unlikely that the killer will be found is because the victimology is so weak now.
Right.
Whereas obviously the longer you go away from the time that it happened, everything deteriorates, your memory, evidence, that sort of thing. So you have to keep focusing on her, but it's got to the point where I think it's going to be really difficult to be able to follow anything up more than what that has at the moment. But there's no point trying to find the killer. You can't find the killer without knowing Teresa and what her movements were.
Yeah. I have to balance this out again. Is that going for as well that if this was an opportunity kill, would you find an opportunity kill in her victimology though? That's where it gets confusing for me.
Yeah, well, that's it. If she lived a risky lifestyle, then yes, possibly. If she was in the habit of picking up hitchhikers, possibly. But it doesn't seem so. I haven't seen anything that suggests that she even lived, apart from the photos that she was involved in.
See, it's always raised a little bar to me, like the hustle shots. They could be on the spare moment kind of jobs where there's no record, there's no paper log. Someone could have flagged it down and said, "Hey, I've got something for sale. Can you come and do my car?" And no one would have even known where she went because it wasn't recorded.
What would be the motive though?
Well, that's the catch. That's the beauty of, like you're saying, is the victimology. that's perfectly said. It kind of sums up what I'm saying. In an opportunity kill, would that happen? And you're saying, well, no, because where's the motive even in an opportunity kill? So I suppose it all balances out, doesn't it?
Yeah, if it was opportunity, I think it would have been a lot messier. They would have found the body, they would have found the scene.
Yep.
By all accounts, it was quite an extensive search, the helicopters and whatnot. I'm sure they would have found something, dogs, but she's disappeared off the face of the earth, and opportunity kills just don't happen like that.
Well, thank you very much. That's what I mean. I appreciate you coming in and helping me with my puzzle pieces. It's these little pieces that, help me form what I'm trying to do. It's looking outside the box and really grabbing that key element, and that is, who is Teresa? I said at the very beginning introduction of this podcast that, who is she? How does she fit into it? And we can't forget that she is the picture we're putting together. So I really do appreciate... Pardon?
She's the key.
She is. She is the key. And like you said, it saddens me to know that so much time has now gone forward that the chances of, really ever finding out who killed her get slimmer by the day, because memories fade, everything slips, and people stop talking.
Yeah.
Just one last question with the victimology though. And it's not more so of the victimology, it's more of a crime-based criminology side of it. The killers though, what is the chances that they would have told someone, or that someone would have suspected?
Oh gosh. Well, it's been my experience that it's pretty rare for someone to do something and not tell someone else about it.
Right.
It's very, very, very. I can't. In fact, I can't. I would struggle to recall anything that someone has done that no one else knows about.
Wow.
Yeah,
is it
burglars? Like people boast about what they've done as the reason they do it. Either to gain street cred, or as a means of intimidation, or trying to, I don't know, what do you call it? Extort people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole range of reasons, but like I said, I cannot recall an incident that has happened where someone else hasn't known about it.
Yeah.
I would struggle to remember. 18 years old, and I struggle to remember any at all. So whoever killed Teresa, if she is in fact dead, because they have their body,
yeah,
someone else would know about it for sure.
Absolutely. I think that's where when we get to the bones thing, I think that's where it's going to come into play, where it might just touch base again on this moment, because someone must have helped do this, and that comes down to whether they helped directly in the crime, or whether they helped someone cover their crime. The thing that I have been reading in all the criminology books and the psychology literature and everything I've been studying at the moment, it really does come down to that someone always knows something. It's whether their demeanor comes off, and like you said, whether they want to come out as they have intimidation. It's someone knows something, and it's just that person having the guts to say it. I did read though, and I just want to touch base, it's, knowing it and acting with them in a crime is two different things. It's from what I read, when it's a passion kill or whatever, on that perspective, where that's someone that you love, it's usually committed by one person and one person only. When it comes to like a rape kind of murder, again, it's usually one person, and that because it's their fantasy, it's their control. They don't like to share that with anybody else. And the times that there is more than two people where there's a rape involved in a murder, that's usually gang related. And drugs, and it's not so personal. It's more of a hey, I've got this woman here and let's,
Yeah.
show off kind of thing. It's really odd
Yeah.
to explain. So I agree with you there. Someone knows something. It's just, they're just not saying anything.
Well, they may not even know. I mean, they may be privy to some sort of change of behaviour, but we're unable to put a finger on why.
Why?
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting with the kills that you said, they almost invariably leave a body or a scene behind.
Yeah.
But there's none of that here. There's no scene or body.
Nothing.
Which just, it really, for mine, takes the opportunity killer angle out of it. And lends towards someone who had a motive and means of disposal and local kind of knowledge and background.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I am going to put all these little pieces together and add it to my thought diaries. No doubt I will probably need your assistance with a few more puzzle pieces down the track if you're keen.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Laters.
Yeah.
It's time to take this information back to the puzzle. It's safe to say the puzzle box we have been looking at is now clear. The picture we are building is Teresa. Is it true what Investigator T said? It starts with her, it ends with her? Thanks for watching. If anyone finds any pieces to the puzzle, be sure to let me know. Until my next thought diaries, Kel.